Long ago, in an age where humanity ruled the stars, they were not merely beings of flesh but gods who shaped reality. They commanded the elements, bent space to their will, and forged empires across the galaxy. However, like all gods, they were not immune to arrogance. Power led to conflict, and soon the gods turned against one another. Their vast civilization collapsed, their divine powers fragmented, and their memory became legend. But legends have a way of resurfacing. In the quiet solitude of a deep underground chamber, Joseph, a seasoned knight of the Order of the Veil, knelt before an ancient artifact. It was an enormous obsidian slab, etched with runes that pulsed faintly beneath its surface. This was one of the relics left behind by the ancient gods, the same relics the Order had sworn to guard for centuries. His cyber-enhanced armor glinted under the dim light, a seamless blend of modern technology and symbols from a forgotten age. His eyes, hardened by years of service, traced the rune patterns. "We're running out of time," came a voice from behind. Joseph turned to see Saran, his lieutenant, a younger knight whose resolve matched his own. Saran's armor, though newer and more advanced, bore the same symbols as Joseph. They were part of a lineage that had survived the fall of gods, trained to protect humanity from threats both alien and divine. Saran approached the relic, his brow furrowed. "The alien fleets are mobilizing," Saran continued. "They've picked up disturbances across the planet. People are changing." Joseph knew exactly what that meant. The awakening had begun. For millennia, the Order had been preparing for this moment. The return of humanity's godlike powers, locked away by the ancient alien races who feared humanity's return to dominance. The aliens had seeded doubt, war, and chaos throughout human history, ensuring the gods never regained their former strength. Yet now, without warning, some humans had begun to rediscover their dormant abilities, powers that could reshape the world or destroy it. "We can't delay any longer," Joseph said, rising to his feet. His voice was steady, but the weight of the situation pressed heavily on him. "We need to prepare the knights for battle. If these powers fall into the wrong hands, we'll be fighting both rogue gods and the alien invasion." Saran nodded, though his expression remained tense. "Do you really think we're ready for this? If the gods themselves were brought down by these powers, what hope do we have of controlling it?" Joseph placed a hand on Saran's shoulder, his grip firm. "It's not about control. It's about balance. Our task is to protect humanity, not to wield these powers for ourselves." Saran looked down, the weight of the responsibility clear on his face. "And if we fail?" Joseph's gaze hardened. "We won't." Meanwhile, far above the earth, the alien coalition known as the Arcadians watched with growing unease. They had observed humanity closely for millennia, monitoring the fragile species from afar, ensuring their technological advancements never strayed too close to the divine. But the recent disturbances, reports of humans manifesting godlike powers, had shaken the Arcadian leadership to its core. In a dimly lit war room aboard their flagship, Commander Xiron, a towering figure with luminescent eyes and intricate markings across his skin, stood before a hollow map of Earth. His subordinates, each from different alien species, exchanged worried glances as data streamed across the screens. "The gods are stirring," Xiron said, his voice deep and resonant, like distant thunder. "The veil is weakening." One of his officers, Corinne, a wiry creature with slender arms, stepped forward. "Commander, if these disturbances continue, we may not be able to contain them. The humans are evolving too quickly. It's only a matter of time before they remember who they truly are." Xiron's gaze was fixed on the glowing map of Earth, his thoughts dark and heavy. He knew the stakes. If humanity awakened to its full potential, they would be unstoppable, just as they had been in ancient times. The Arcadian alliance had been forged for one purpose: to prevent the rise of the gods. And now, it seemed, that purpose was being tested. "We must act before it's too late," Xiron said, turning sharply to his officers. "Prepare the fleets. Earth must be pacified before the humans fully awaken. We cannot allow the gods to return, Back on Earth, chaos had already begun to unfold. In cities across the globe, ordinary people were suddenly overwhelmed by powers they neither understood nor could control. A businessman in New York found himself able to conjure flames with a single thought, burning his office building to the ground in a panic. In Tokyo, a soldier collapsed in the streets as lightning crackled from his body, devastating the surrounding blocks. And in Moscow, a student bent the very fabric of time, creating rifts in reality that destabilized entire neighborhoods. These incidents were just the beginning. In the heart of the chaos, the Knights of the Order of the Veil moved swiftly. They were trained not only in modern combat, but in the ancient ways, armed with relics capable of suppressing divine power. Joseph led his team through the streets of a small town now ravaged by uncontrolled energy, his eyes scanning for the source of the disturbance. A young man stood at the center of it all, glowing with an otherworldly light, his hands trembling as he struggled to contain the raw power flowing through him. Buildings around him cracked and shattered under the strain of his energy. Joseph approached cautiously, his weapon ready but his voice calm. "You don't have to be afraid," he said. "We can help you." The young man's eyes flickered with terror and confusion. "I didn't mean to. I can't stop it." Saran moved to flank him, his weapon raised. "Joseph, we're running out of time." The air around them began to hum, the power reaching a breaking point. Joseph had no choice. He raised his weapon, an ancient relic that glowed in response to the godlike energy before him. "Forgive me," Joseph whispered as he activated the relic. A blinding light filled the street, and the young man's powers were suppressed for now. But Joseph knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The awakening had begun, and the war to protect humanity from itself was just beginning. The world was unraveling faster than anyone could have anticipated. Across the globe, humanity's dormant powers were stirring, awakening in unpredictable ways. The awakening, once merely a whisper in ancient texts, had become an undeniable reality. While some saw it as a miracle, others knew it was the harbinger of an approaching storm. Joseph stood on the outskirts of a battlefield that had once been a bustling city square. Now, it was reduced to craters and smoldering rubble, the air thick with the scent of burning metal and scorched earth. The battle had been swift. Untrained civilians, unaware of their newfound godlike abilities, had erupted in uncontrollable fits of power, leaving destruction in their wake. Some summoned earthquakes, others bent the sky, and a few had even torn open rifts in the fabric of time itself. The Knights of the Order of the Veil were stretched thin, struggling to contain the chaos. Joseph, heart weighed heavy as he surveyed the wreckage, knowing the worst was yet to come. They had no time to grieve for the dead or the lost, for the true enemy had finally arrived. "They're here." Saran's voice crackled over the communicator in Joseph's helmet. Joseph lifted his gaze to the skies. Above the smoke and ash, the heavens split open, revealing the dark shapes of alien warships descending through the atmosphere. The Arcadians had arrived. As the ships loomed closer, they unleashed waves of alien soldiers, dropping to the ground in sleek black armor, weapons drawn. These soldiers were not here for negotiations. They had one purpose: to eliminate any human showing signs of divine power. Joseph turned to Saran, who had taken position beside him, his plasma rifle glowing softly in his hands. The younger knight's face was grim, the seriousness of the moment pressing down on them both. "They've come to stop us from becoming gods," Saran muttered. "They're going to kill everyone." Joseph nodded, his expression hardening. This is what they feared all along. They knew the awakening would come, and now they're here to erase us before we become a threat again. Far above, on the bridge of the Arcadian flagship, Commander Xiron observed the invasion unfolding with calculated precision. His glowing eyes narrowed as he studied the human resistance on the ground. The knights, with their advanced weapons and relics, were formidable, but they were still nothing compared to the might of the Arcadian armada. "Target the highest concentration of rogue gods," Xiron commanded. "We cannot afford to let them reach their full potential." Beside him, Corinne, the four-armed officer, tapped rapidly at a console, coordinating the strikes. It's worse than we anticipated, Commander. Several humans are already exhibiting powers we've never encountered before. Zyron's voice was cold as he replied. Then we strike harder. We have one chance to stop them, or we risk facing the gods again. On the ground, the first wave of alien soldiers charged forward. The knights moved to intercept, their cyber-enhanced armor and relics glowing as they leaped into the fray. Joseph led the charge, wielding a sword infused with ancient energy, cutting through the alien ranks with practiced precision. Saran moved beside him, his plasma rifle unleashing bursts of energy that tore through the enemy lines. The battle was brutal, chaotic, a clash of ancient power and futuristic warfare. The Arcadians were relentless, their tactics precise, and their technology far beyond anything Earth's military had ever seen. But the knights fought with a different kind of strength, one born not just from their training, but from their connection to the divine legacy of their ancestors. As the battle raged, Joseph could feel the ground vibrating beneath his feet. The air around him buzzed with a strange energy. He knew what was coming before it happened. A nearby civilian, a man barely in his 20s, was beginning to awaken. His eyes glowed white, and an aura of raw power surged around him. The earth cracked beneath him, and shards of stone and concrete began to rise into the air, rotating in a storm of uncontrolled energy. Joseph raced toward him, shouting over the din of battle, "You need to calm down. Focus, or you'll destroy everything." The young man's expression was one of terror, unable to comprehend the godlike power flowing through him. I can't stop it." Saran moved in, his voice urgent. "He's going to tear the whole city apart, Joseph. We need to contain him, now." But it was too late. The young man screamed as the power overwhelmed him, and a shockwave of energy exploded outward. Buildings crumbled, and alien soldiers were thrown into the air like rag dolls. Joseph barely managed to raise his shield in time, the relic's energy protecting him and Saran from the blast. As the dust settled, Joseph looked around at the devastation. Alien forces were regrouping, and more civilians were starting to awaken across the battlefield, their powers unpredictable and dangerous. Saran, breathing heavily, turned to Joseph. "We can't keep this up. They're not trained for this. Every time one of them awakens, it's like a bomb going off." Joseph clenched his jaw. "That's why we're here, to guide them before they lose control." His eyes flicked to the skies, where the Arcadian warships loomed like dark clouds. "And to stop them before the aliens wipe us out." A sudden roar filled the air, and from the heavens descended a massive Arcadian assault ship, its weapons charging as it prepared to obliterate the remaining human forces. Joseph felt the ground shake as the ship's energy cannons powered up, the impending destruction moments away. "We're out of time," Saran said, his voice filled with dread. Joseph, mind raced. They needed to neutralize the threat, and fast. He reached for the relic at his belt, an ancient device that pulsed with divine energy. It had the power to stop the Arcadian ship. But using it would require channeling a portion of his own latent power, the very thing the Order had trained him to avoid. Saran's eyes widened as he realized what Joseph intended. "You can't—" "I have no choice," Joseph interrupted, gripping the relic tightly. "If we don't stop them now, there won't be anything left to protect." With a deep breath, Joseph activated the relic. A surge of ancient energy coursed through him, his body glowing with the power of a long-forgotten god. The air around him crackled as the energy built, and with a shout, he released it. A blinding light shot upward, striking the Arcadian ship and sending it spiraling out of control. The sky lit up as the ship exploded, debris raining down in fiery streaks. The battlefield fell silent, the remaining alien forces retreating in disarray. As the light faded, Joseph staggered, the strain of using the relic evident. Saran rushed to his side, helping him stay upright. "Are you all right?" Saran asked, concern etched on his face. Joseph nodded, though his body felt weakened. For now. But this is only the beginning. The air was heavy with the tension of impending war. The Arcadians had retreated, but only to regroup. In the brief lull, Joseph stood at the heart of the Knights' war camp, overlooking a holographic map of Earth. The alien ships hovered like dark omens over major cities, preparing for the final push to annihilate humanity's resurgence. Across the globe, humans continued to awaken, some embracing their godlike powers, while others became ticking time bombs, unable to control their newfound abilities. The Order of the Veil was all that stood between the complete extinction of humankind and the ascension of their divine lineage. But the question loomed over Joseph and his knights. Were they ready for what was to come? Could they protect the species on the brink of both destruction and divinity? Joseph had little time to reflect. The Order's remaining knights had gathered for what would be their last stand. Saran, standing beside him, held his helmet under one arm, his face pale but resolute. His voice was low when he spoke. "I'm not sure we're strong enough to face what's coming. We can barely control the awakened, and the Arcadians are regrouping faster than we can defend." Joseph tightened his grip on the hilt of his ancient sword, feeling the pulse of energy within it. "We don't have a choice. If we fall, humanity falls with us." The camp stirred as a figure approached. It was Lucan, the youngest of the knights, barely a year into his training. His cyber-enhanced armor gleamed, but his face betrayed the fear beneath the stoic exterior. "Commander, we've detected movement. The Arcadian fleet. They're converging on the capital." Joseph's eyes narrowed. "They're trying to break our last line of defense." Saran grimaced. "If they take the capital, it's over. Every major city will fall within hours." For a moment, silence fell between the three men. They all knew what this battle meant. It was no longer just about defeating the Arcadians. It was about deciding the future of their species. The awakening had begun, and there was no stopping it now. Joseph had felt it growing inside him ever since he had used the relic in the last battle, the dormant power of the gods stirring in his blood. But he wasn't alone. More and more humans were awakening, their powers unpredictable and often destructive. "We need to strike first," Joseph said, his voice firm with resolve. "We can't let them dictate the battlefield. We take the fight to them." Lucan's eyes widened. "You mean attack the Arcadian flagship?" Saran glanced at Joseph. "It's a suicide mission." Joseph shook his head. "No, it's the only mission." He pointed to the map, where the flagship loomed over the capital like a predator preparing to strike. "If we destroy their command structure, we force them into chaos. They'll scatter, and that's when we take them down." Saran sighed, but there was a flicker of determination in his eyes. "Then we do it. We hit them hard and fast." Hours later, the knights were airborne, their dropship slicing through the clouds toward the massive Arcadian flagship that dominated the sky over the capital. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, the hum of the ship's engines barely masking the weight of what was to come. Joseph stood at the front, gripping the side rail, his mind focused on the battle ahead. "Once we're on board, there's no going back," he reminded the team. "We target the core systems, destabilize the ship. It's the only way to stop them from launching their final assault." Saran, seated next to him, checked his weapons one last time. "What about the awakened down there? They're fighting too, fighting the aliens and their own powers." Joseph clenched his jaw. "They'll either rise or fall with the rest of us." The drop was swift and brutal. The knights landed on the hull of the Arcadian flagship, their armor absorbing the impact as they leaped into action. Joseph led the charge, his sword glowing with divine energy, cutting through Arcadian soldiers with swift, lethal precision. The corridors of the ship pulsed with alien technology, but the knights moved with purpose, clearing their way toward the core. They met heavy resistance as they neared the command center. The Arcadians were prepared, their elite guard blocking the path with energy weapons and advanced combat tactics. But the knights pressed on, their armor deflecting most of the blasts, their relics glowing with the power of their ancestors. At the center of the battle, Joseph felt the power inside him building. Stronger, more insistent than ever before, the ancient energy of the gods was awakening within him, demanding to be unleashed. But he knew the cost. If he let it loose fully, there would be no turning back. He would transcend humanity, becoming something else, something the world might not survive. Saran, fighting beside him, noticed a change in Joseph. "Joseph, don't. You can't. I have to," Joseph interrupted, his voice strained. "It's the only way." In a final, desperate act, Joseph reached for the deepest reserves of his power. With a roar, he unleashed it. A wave of pure energy exploded from him, tearing through the alien ranks and shaking the ship to its core. The walls trembled, and the power conduit sparked as the divine force ripped through the flagship. The ship began to collapse around them, the alien systems overloading under the strain of Joseph's unleashed power. Arcadian soldiers fell as the energy surged, their weapons flickering and failing. The knights pushed forward, deeper into the heart of the ship. Finally, they reached the command center. Commander Xiron stood at its center, his alien eyes glowing with fury. He had underestimated the humans, and now it was too late. Joseph, radiating power, stepped forward. "This is for humanity," Joseph said, his voice echoing with divine authority. With one final strike, Joseph plunged his sword into the heart of the Arcadian core. The ship shuddered violently, and a chain reaction of explosions began to tear through its structure. Alarms blared as Xiron's expression shifted from anger to resignation. As the flagship exploded around them, the knights activated their emergency teleporters, vanishing just before the ship disintegrated in a massive fireball. The skies over the capital cleared as the Arcadian fleet, now leaderless and in chaos, scattered. Back on Earth, Joseph stood with Saran and Lucan, looking up at the sky where the flagship had once loomed. The alien threat had been pushed back, for now, but the awakening was far from over. "You did it," Saran said, though there was an edge to his voice. "You used the power." Joseph nodded slowly, his gaze distant. "I did, and now we face the consequences." As the remnants of the Arcadian fleet retreated into space, Joseph knew the war was far from over. Humanity had reclaimed its place in the galaxy. But at what cost? The gods were stirring, and the future was uncertain. "We're not just knights anymore," Joseph said softly. "We're gods. And now, the real battle begins."